Hello and a warm welcome to Tanzania Today, a program that aims to project Tanzania's position to the globe economically, socially, politically, and diplomatically. I am your host, Faida Ngaga. And today we're going to discuss about the significance of the election process towards national development. As we all know, Tanzania currently is in the election process and the political campaigns have been officially launched. And in October 29th, that is the official date whereby Tanzanians will go to the polls and vote for their desired candidates. So today we're discussing this whole process, even after the voting process, this whole election process, how significant is it towards national development? And with me in the studio today is a groundbreaking members of panel. To my left is Dr. Ambassador Msuya Mangachi, who is not only has very extensive knowledge in diplomatic issues, but also political issues. But to my right is Dr. Bravius Kahioza, who is an economic expert, but also he has extensive knowledge in political issues as well. So we're going to discuss this. And to start, there's this jargon, this political term that is free and fair elections. It usually comes up, especially during the election season. What does it actually mean? And I'm going to take this question directly to Ambassador Mangachi. What does free and fair election mean in a democratic nation like Tanzania?
Before we attempt to define that, we should actually talk about the elections themselves. Why elections? What is the genesis of elections? Why do people vote? This is a relationship between the people and their government. You know, all the time people would like to participate. It's participatory, to participate in the process of running the government. They would like their views to be all the time reflected in the way the government is run, in their interests. That's how it was. And in the past, during the in the years 500 BC, before Christ, right? In Greece, for example, people used to directly participate in those affairs, but then this was the beginning of the concept of democracy, where people would go in a place, discuss state affairs, and make decisions so that the government carries out these decisions. And since that time, there have been dictatorships all over. And there is a struggle between masses trying to control, to have their voices heard in the way the affairs of the government are run, and those who are running the government. Now, under dictatorship, you can imagine, they absolutely have no voice. And how does it end? In France, it ended with French Revolution. You know, people storming the Bastille, where the king was staying, you know, to take it over and overthrow the king, and then establish a government which is based on the representation of the masses, the people. In the United States, it was a lot of people do not know that the independence of United States is a reaction of the American people against British rule, you know? And if you come to the genesis of colonialism all along, when the colonialists were all over, there was no way, there was no relationship between the people and the way the government was run. It was just a dictatorial relationship. They gave orders and they had to be carried over. And people had to fight against colonialism. And when the colonialists left, this is when you see these forms of democracies. Not everybody can go to the parliament to make decisions, but they need now to vote to select representatives who can go to these institutions and make laws and other processes which require the voice of the people to be reflected in the way the government is run. And how is this done? It's done through political parties. At one point, of course, it was a one-party system like in Tanzania, but eventually it became a multi-party system as of 1992, I believe. We're in a multi-party system with 19 parties now. And the purpose is to elect representatives who can go to parliament and represent us. And the genesis of it is to have the people's interests reflected in the way the government is run. And this is at the level of the parliament. But there's the level of local governments, you know, where you have representatives also. And the process covers both aspects of, I mean, our electoral system covers all the segments of presidency, members of parliament, and representatives of municipal representatives. Yes.
Yes.
So when you're talking of free and fair elections, now the context is there. Who goes to represent them in these institutions? If they have these parties and they have to select people and to select the representatives and so on, it's a competitive situation because there are many people who are running for these elections and they have to be vetted or voted for by the people. Now, in that process, many things can happen. Maybe some corruption can happen. You know, some people might buy their way through. They might buy votes from the people and so on and so on. And if somebody gets to be elected after giving corruption, for example, you cannot judge that he has been freely elected. So there must be a mechanism to ensure that the level playing field is leveled for everybody. Everybody has an equal chance of participating in the contest, and then the elections are done in a manner which is transparent, and everybody must be convinced at the end of the process that the elections were fairly done and they were free and fair.
And fair.
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Kahioza, free and fair elections, how do they contribute to the building of strong institutions that now lead to national development?
Thank you. I think I would like to thank Mheshimiwa Balozi for setting the ball. And I think he has made our work easier in terms of now going forward into the question you have asked. But I would like also to cement this argument that when you look at the elections and how they build institutions and so forth and so on, it's very important to understand that we cannot discuss that without centering on the fact of the existence of the state. And I like the point when he explained how far we have gone from the colonial era to the present. Now, look, you have two ways at looking at it when you talk about free and fair elections. One is what I would like to call substantive democracy. And two, the procedural democracy. Now, in states like ours, like Tanzania, our focus must be on the substantive way of democracy. And this means, one, do we, or are we in the struggle, are we still in the struggle of attaining free, independent states? We had the administrative state from the colonialists. And the reasons as to why we struggled to get rid of them was to have a political state. Now, the question is, how do you have the political state? A political state, you have it when people of that particular state or particular country, so to speak, are the controllers, define the destiny of those who want to lead them. Now, it is not country A, B, or C to make leaders for these people, but the people themselves within who get their leaders. And that is very important. For example, when we talk about Tanzania today, we are in the electioneering period. Do we have that political state? Have we achieved that? And are we still in the struggle to have that particular state? Yes, my answer is a sound yes. Two, is that when you question people that why do they go into the elections to vote for their leaders, what do they aspire to get? So one side, as I've said, you have these procedures, as he has explained very well. But on the other side, that substantively, the substantive aspect of that is what are our issues? What are the issues do we want to these people to do for us, or we and the leaders do for our nation? And there's a plethora of issues. Number one is, for example, the economic reasons. There are social issues. There are political issues again. And then you have even the way Tanzania, for example, relate with the rest of the world. A nation gets its international legitimacy from these elections. And it is at that point. So what do you look at? You look at, for example, how do we get those leaders into power? You look at what they represent, the values they represent, mainly through political parties, and then they have manifestos, and these manifestos are well digested, are well dissected through written documents, and then, of course, by people going to the people to present what they think they believe in, and these people get chance to put them in power. And that has been happening. And this time we'll, again, go into that cycle, and people will assess these manifestos. Now, lastly is, how now do they form, how do these elections become the basis for building these institutions? And I would like to categorize these institutions in the following ways. Number one are the economic institutions. People go into the elections to make sure that economic institutions will still be functional immediately after the elections. And in here, you are looking at how, for example, you reach at for example, you can take the budgeting process, because you have representatives. The whole essence of elections is to have representatives, and these representatives are the ones who go through the processes of having, for example, the budget for the nation. That's where you discuss issues like taxation, for example, and how those matters will be dispensed. And that is attaining in this process. Then you have social institutions. Immediately after you have elections, of course, these institutions have to, so one is, it is the point of aggression. That's why people go to elect them. They have issues related to health, for example, to education, and there are spiritual matters. And we need to have people after elections who will stand for these institutions for their progression. And of course, we have these political institutions. In political institutions, it is about the government. And I always like to define government in two layers. One is the political government. You have the political post, for example, the president, the ministers, and the rest. But you have the technocrat government that exists because you have the political institutions. And therefore, because these political institutions are attained after or through elections process, you cannot have the existing technocrat institutions if you don't have that first layer. So the technocrats, of course, will depend, I think in many democracies in the world, will depend on the existence of the political institutions. And it is the process of elections where we get these important technocrat institutions. So lastly, it is about now people's development. and I think we'll discuss later about that. People like to define and to ask themselves, so since we got independence, for example, since the first elections to date, a phase after another, what have we achieved, and what do we aspire now to achieve in these elections and going forward?
You want to add something, Ambassador? Yes.
Something about institutions.
Yes.
And the political, I mean the election process, right? You talked about free and fair elections. You need institutions to ensure this. And what are these institutions? You need, first, the setup of the government is the executive, which constitutes the president. Then you have the parliament, and you have the judiciary. Now, these are very important institutions, and in the specific context of elections, you have the Electoral Commission, which should oversee the whole process. Now, in the course of undertaking elections, there is an interplay of these institutions in such a manner that you can credibly, first, the institutions must be very strong. If you send corrupt people to parliament, what will happen? If the judiciary is not fair or strong, if the Electoral Commission is not perceived to be independent, for example, you can see, you can hear the rumblings of some opposition parties and so on talking about it. And of course, the measures have been taken to ensure that to a great extent, the Electoral Commission is now independent, and that's why it's called Independent Electoral Commission now, right? It's important. It's an institution within the process of elections. And you can see it's a whole, the whole government machinery depends on this process of elections. So when you're talking of institutions that are created or that should be created or made strong to ensure the smooth running of a polity or the state, you're talking about the whole array of this and the aspects which, of course, Dr. Kahioza has elaborated on other institutions which maybe translate the aspirations of the people, because the people go to elections with their aspirations. They want economic development, they want cultural, education, medical facilities, and so on. They want development. So how do you translate those aspirations? You need also to create the institutions. Yeah.
So you've spoken about people having certain expectations from the leaders. Now, how can the election process be a tool for accountability of the leaders to ensure that they implement on the national development agendas? Is there a way elections can act as an accountability tool?
Sure. Maybe we should start from the beginning, that those who have been there are some people who have been in power who did not perform, who did not do a good job. So when you subject them to elections, the people who are the voters are going to judge whether the guy who was there did a good job or not. So it's a way of you use the word accountability. They must be accountable to the voters. If you did a good job, they reward you. They might vote you back. But if you didn't do a good job, they leave you out. And you can see the preliminary voting process. Almost 50% of the former members of parliament have been voted out by their preferential votes in the CCM party, for example. Yes.
Let's talk about investors' confidence and FDI, foreign direct investment. In what ways can election influence these two things?
I think there are a number of ways. Number one is that the economy runs on confidence. You remove confidence in the economy, then everything crumbles. And that's how elections, of course, inform different metrics of macroeconomics and, of course, microeconomics as well. So what are these ways? I think number one is there should be assurance that there will be political stability, and not political stability during the elections and after the elections, but also before the elections. Now, what has happened all over the planet is that some researchers have been studying what we call political shocks. And these happen sometimes before elections, during elections in some countries, and then after elections. Now, if you have the political civilization, the political culture that helps a nation not to fall into these shocks, then you are sure that your nation or your country, I think, will have a good right in terms of how it relates to the rest of the world when it comes to investment, comes to foreign direct investments and the rest. And then number two is that these shocks also test the economic institutions of your countries. And these institutions mainly, for example, we talk about the central bank in any particular nation and what we call the Ministry of Finance. If you, for example, if you have a lot, for example, of spending from the coffers of the nations in terms of how you run your elections, that means you have little fiscal space to have these credible, vibrant institutions to support the attraction, for example, of what you want from other countries. And the central bank, for example, how is it independent in a way that it can stabilize macroeconomic variables? Then capital will be shy. It is always a factor. The capital will be shy to get into that particular country because maybe the central bank is not independent enough before the elections, during the elections, even after. And we have had cases in many countries where central banks are used in these elections, of course, to influence one side or the other in terms of how much cash or money is spent without clear procedures. And now, if you have those scenarios, then of course it will fall flat in terms of economic stability. And then, of course, after elections, when you have had the process and then the elections are over, to what extent will people feel comfortable to still flow in your country? To what extent people within, of course, also within the state will be comfortable that they can keep on doing their businesses is always a factor. Now let me give you some statistics. Between 1990 and 2020, Tanzania has had one election shock, major of 2000. And it is the only country in the region that has had only one political shock, election shock after the elections. The rest, the average is 4 to 3 election shocks. And what has happened to those countries, in some of the neighboring countries, is that during the election shocks, their economies dwindled by 3 to 4% in terms of their growth. And that's the reason why Tanzania, for example, has catched up very quickly with one of our neighboring state that seemed to be ahead of us. It is because of that reason. Number two, because of the absence of election shocks, Tanzania's economy immediate after elections, that has been our history. And you can go, for those who are watching us now, you can go and you can just Google. Immediate after every election, Tanzanian economy has always expanded by 3 points in terms of GDP growth. The rest, in East Africa, for example, immediate after elections, the economies have always dwindled by 2% in every election. In fact, there are even numbers, how much those countries lose in terms of the nominal figures. Number three, every elections in Tanzania, after elections, what has been one factor that has prevailed in terms of the economies is that FDIs tend to flow much more quickly, unlike the neighboring countries. And let me give you some statistics again. Immediately after the 2005 elections, our FDIs in Tanzania, according to the World Trade Organization, had increased by 16%. It was immense, of course, in 2015. And then, 2005. 2010 again, it didn't grow by 16%, but again it grew by 7%. Of course, it had dropped because there were, I think the elections were more competitive compared to 2005. Again, 2015, of course, we had some shocks, but they were not termed. They didn't meet the measure of calling them election shocks, because of course it was just, they were just competitive, unlike the previous elections. But again, they were 4 points increase. Of course, later on, there was a shrink because of other factors, and of course of COVID later on. So we have had the three elements in terms of economic growth, in terms of FDIs, and in terms of nominal growth of the economy immediately after the elections. I don't expect anything different this year. I think if we get everything right, I'm hopeful that immediately after the elections, you will be able to keep with the same trajectory. And a footnote that when you talk about FDIs in Tanzania, we talk about investments in Tanzania, we have a very good record if you are to compare Tanzania with the rest of the friends.
Ambassador Mangachi, Dr. Kayoza has elaborated about the political shocks and how in Tanzania, compared to other parts of Africa and even across the region, has had few, if not almost insignificant shocks. What are the contributing factors for Tanzania to have this political culture that after elections there isn't much political shocks, maybe for other countries also to learn from?
I think it's a result of the overall situation. Tanzania is a very peaceful country, and everybody talks of it as an island of peace, because if you look around, there's trouble all over, except here. Now, if you conduct elections in a peaceful atmosphere, the result is likely to be peaceful as well. But I think it is also the organization of it that over years, since independence, over 65 years of independence, we've carried a number of elections after every 5 years, right? And each election comes with its challenges, but we gain experience. I think we have more experience in how to handle whatever shortcomings, and all the time they're trying to perfect it. And for example, right now, there are many issues about this election, but there is also a lot of mechanisms under which the issues are being discussed and they're being resolved, either in court or through consultations or through the 4 Rs which our president has introduced, where people can come and resolve their issues. I think all these contribute to a kind of peaceful elections.
Yeah, I wanted to add a few things. Number one is about I think there are things that we would have to work on in the future. Number one is what we call the human rights approach to elections, or the human rights approach to development. Of course, we have to agree that we have our own wrangles and squabbles within. And that's why the president came out and said we need reforms, she came up with a 4R philosophy and so forth. Of course, it has worked to a certain extent, but I think immediately after the elections, we'll have to go back and check if we really have sorted out the glaring mess that we need to do that. Number two is what a famous political economist wrote, the late Professor George Aite from Ghana, of the Africa Unchained, and that in his argument was that there were issues that when we were struggling for independence, we are aspiring to achieve, and on the process, we attained some, and we tended to have some sort of over-relaxation that we have settled our houses are in order. And I think Tanzania is going through that period. We have had, as I've said, we have been a peaceful, as Balozi said, we have had a peaceful nation. And elections have been non-events, not non-events in terms of thwarting democracy, but non-events in terms of not prioritizing the negative side of elections or democracy over the existence of the state and over the economy. That we have achieved. Going forward then, I think we have to do that work, that job of making sure that now, because of changing technology, because of the changing social structures, because of Tanzania being more integrated to the globe, the political liberalization in our nation is very much tied to what is happening all over the globe. Then I think we'll have to navigate those waters to make sure that we'll keep the pace we have been having. And I think there is no denying that we have had some cracks. And these cracks, of course, as Balozi said, when we have these cracks, it has been our culture. When we have these cracks, we have that culture of working to solve these issues. Now, the results, I think the aftermath of the 2025 elections I think it is my personal view that the aftermath of these elections, it will be time for the nation, I think, to buttress the principles that have held us together this far and make us a peaceful nation, so much we can be at a position whereby even if you have this push and back from within or outside, they will not be able to do that. And one of the ways is to make these institutions more stronger, make people more participative in these processes, and making sure that we keep building on the Uzalendo culture that we have been having.
You've spoken about making people be active. There's usually the discussion of having more youth participate in the election process. Why is it significant to have youth in the election process, both as people who are being voted for, but also as voters?
Oh, this is the most dynamic aspect of our population. For example, in Tanzania, I've heard that out of roughly 36 million voters, probably 50% are in the youth category between 18 years and 35 years. Now, these include youths who are coming to a voting age for the first time. So it's a huge army of people with their aspirations, expectations of a political system that is going to solve their problems. Now, that's where they become very dynamic, because they're dynamic in expecting that the system is going to deliver, but also I think the enthusiasm to participate for those who are coming in for the first time, But I think the most important thing is the motivation they get and the hope they have of solving their problems. And what are their problems? First and foremost, of course, is the education sector, where all of them would like to advance and get the new technologies and the new skills and so on, so that they can position themselves to get employment or to do some independent self-employment within the society. That requires those kinds of special skills, and a lot of work, of course, is being done by the government in that direction. So you can see the youth scrambling on that because of those expectations, as I see it.
I think also I think about in terms of the youth, I think the one side is how do they participate in the process itself towards electing their leaders. The question is they have to participate, and their participation has to be seen, not only in terms of resentments, as we have been seeing, but also in terms of getting the right things that are that is happening in the country. But that is not one-sided to the youth. I think also as we go into the elections, it's very important from the social institution, from the families, the origin, and the rest, to get these young people to the light of what are the realities. And why it is important, again, as I say, that why it is important that when everything is done, is said, at the end of it all, you need to have this state. You need to have this nation, because elections can be, I mean, the problems with the elections, the ramshackle of the elections can be rectified at any given point. But you cannot be in a position where you are ready, of course, to lose the nation. Once you do that, then we won't be debating about that. But even after, so I was saying about, it is about them, but on the side it's about the institutions that should be responsible to give the guidelines. One is the social institutions, but two, the political institutions, and even the government institutions, in a sense that they are giving hope. As Bonaparte said, that leaders are dealers in hope. So whenever there is no sense of hope, it is incumbent upon the leaders, incumbent upon the social institutions to make these young people. Now, after elections again, because at the end of it all, we will debate on for example, on the fairness from the question of asked, were these elections fair? Are these should be in power? It is also incumbent upon the leaders who will be elected, and these institutions have said, to say, hey, we have a nation to build, and not to talk at them. No, it's talk to them, to listen to these young people. Because this nation, as I said, it is a youth led in terms of numbers, in terms of what we want to achieve. And therefore, I find it that the youth is one, I mean, youth-related affairs, it is one single important issue that we need to deal with during the elections, but of course, more importantly, after the elections.
Let's look back at the previous elections. What lessons can be learned with regards to the relationship between elections and development? What lessons can we draw from the previous elections? Ambassador.
Well, you know, the elections in Tanzania are done in two parts. There's the Tanzanian elections and there are Zanzibar elections. Now, the record shows that the elections that have been done in Tanzania have been improving from year to year. Unfortunately, Zanzibar has been problematic, but as I said, this culture of having mechanisms to address grievances has helped us a lot to solve the problems. For example, when there was a big problem in 2010 elections, I think dialogue did take place between the parties that were aggrieved and the government, and a government of national unity came in place, and things calmed up, you know. On Tanzania mainland, I think we are a bit lucky because we do not have the big events, you know, like the problems which post-election crisis, like the neighbors had in 2007, I think. Yeah, they had a big problem, a fallout after those elections, taking the intervention of President Kikwete at that time when he was president of Tanzania, going there and trying to help them solve the problem. You know, if you mishandle elections, anything can happen. And the way we have been handling our elections, with the exception of the hiccups we have had in Zanzibar, but which have been smoothed out, I think we are doing very well.
Dr. Kahioza, what lessons have we learned with regards to the relationship between development and elections? Because we've agreed that elections are significant in order to achieve development of a nation.
Yes, of course, because of democracy, the direct link between democracy, which is in this sense when it comes to the procedural aspect of democracy, then you need to elect leaders, and then leaders will be given responsibilities to execute these responsibilities. There are many lessons, but I would like to summarize them the following. Number one is that we have kept peace. And of course, from the economic perspective, in 2026, the economic fraternity will be celebrating 50 years since Adam Smith came into this earth, and of course, economics has been driven by his brilliance. And one of the things we learned from Adam Smith, and that will be celebrating 50 years of his birthday, is that you cannot build a society, you cannot have economic development, you cannot have prosperity if peace is in absence. Now, as I have said before, when we were starting this show, in terms of the election shock, the political shocks, we have maintained that, and that has given us peace. So one is important. You can talk about losing it if you have it. Once you lose it, you go and ask those people who have done that. So we have to keep in mind that has been our scorecard, and we need to keep on bringing it on board. Number two is, of course, development itself, or growth. Now, every election, after every election in this country, between one election and the other, we have seen enormous economic growth. And one, I keep on insisting, because that does not happen if you don't control these shocks. And we have seen that after, I don't like to give these numbers, after every 5 years, immediately when we have elections, our GDP expansion between one election and the other has been in the tune of $6 billion US dollars before 2010. After 2010, our average is $9 billion. So between one election and the other, our economy has expanded. Of course, we have broken records between 2015, 2020, and 2020, and now they have gone into the tune of 16 to 22 billion US dollars. That is enormous, of course. And then that does not happen because leaders are not responsible. It happens because leaders are responsible. So let's get these leaders who will be responsible, and then they give that track record. And that number three is that these leaders have made sure that our nation remains a nation among nations. They have flied our flag high in the community of nations. And I believe that it won't be any different. We have to, that is a great reason to make sure that Tanzania will remain standing high when it comes to the international community. Lastly, that it has been a nation that has valued its people. I know we have a lot of discontent and debates about that, but nations are built. Nations are not constructed. If you are constructing a house and then you say it has reached at this point, but building a nation takes a lot, because if you are coming from the colonial status, as I have said, and it is important to keep on valuing our people. When all is done in politics, in these elections, it is about our people, because this nation is for her people. And to what extent leaders who get elected or people who elect leaders understand that is very magnificent when it comes to prosperity. So I think these are the lessons that we have had. But lastly, let me not forget that, the point Balozi had said, that we have always maintained this spirit of dealing with our problems. So we accept, that is a blessing to us, that we accept that we have challenges. And when we get to understand that, we always sit at the table and deal with these issues. I do hope that that's what will happen during the elections and immediately after the elections, that let's accept that we have these challenges, and then we sit together, we do housekeeping, and so that we can move forward as a stable, prosperous, and a developing, not a developing, actually, a rich country going into the future.
I want to add the perspective of the vision 2025 and 2050. And the election manifestos that are put forward by parties. You know, the parties kind of come out with manifestos, each one saying how best they are going to manage if they are voted into power, for example. And the ruling party, of course, CCM has a very elaborate one. I have not seen the manifestos of the other parties, but I think everyone who comes out with the manifesto is addressing how he can implement a vision which is in place. And this is very important because, you know, during Mwalimu's time, there was an ideology of socialism and self-reliance. So, you know, you had to explain to the people how you are going to implement that. And that now we are in a liberal situation, but we have a vision that is guiding us where we want to go. So it forms a very rich debate amongst political parties, if you want, or within the leaders who want to go to parliament or to join the government, to say, if you vote me to the government, I'll be able to do this and this in accordance with this vision. And this cohesion of a vision and a plan of development is very key to the achievements which Dr. Kayoza has mentioned. Yeah.
Let's talk about the issue of gender in elections. So this year, Tanzania has witnessed more women vying for the top job in the country, the presidency. This could be according to many factors, the efforts, of course, that have been put forward by different organizations, the country itself. But why is it significant for this large population of the country, the women, to participate in the election process? Dr. Kayoza.
Very, very, very important. I haven't checked this year's data, but if you are to look between 1995 and 2020, for every for every 4 voters in Tanzania, do you know that 3 are women? For every 4 voters, 3 are women in Tanzania. So they are representing the majority. they vote immensely compared to men. And of course, they are men. So in terms of giving the votes, in terms of voting, so if you have many people who are voting, then you should expect that there should be many leaders as well from the that side. So I want to say that number one is that the political space, if you want to call it that way, it is by and large occupied by women in terms of the people who are voting, and therefore you expect many people, of course, from that side to lead. Number two, I think it is important because if you look at the productive factors of our economy, and I said here last week in our show that today in economics we have what we call womenomics, and you can't have a modern nation in managing our economies if you sideline women. You cannot have that. There are numbers which are showing, for example, that there are good managers, for example, in terms of running these institutions and the companies. But two, they are the people who make this steering wheel in terms of economic development move. So you cannot fail to mainstream women. And therefore, they have to be part, not only part and parcel, but have to be at the steering wheel in terms of everything that we do. Lastly, is that you see what we have seen is that because these naturally women are mothers, and when you want to have a nation that is caring for its people, you need mothers at the helm. And now we have, as you have said, many contestants from the top seat, and again even in the representatives. Because let's remember our views that it's for the first time that people, for example, from the ruling party, who will be contesting in the constituents, the number is outperforming the previous. So you have these many, I think you will have many MPs this time. And I don't want to use this platform to campaign. Of course, even I think at the presidential level, because there are many, you'll have a female president again. And this tells you that the mothering function of the state at the moment now is in the hands of women. And therefore, there is no way you will say that you wouldn't like to see these people be at the center of everything. That being said, I want to buttress the point I said, that you don't build, you can't manage the modern economy if you don't have these people at the center. But they have to remember, leading or being at the helm is one thing. And I have to tell our mothers, our wives, our sisters, like you, Father, that being at the helm is one thing. But working for many women who are downtrodden there is another thing. And it is my conviction that these things have not matched up. Of course, I have to say that since President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan came into power, she has done a tremendous job in terms of turning the wheel. She has, of course, in many ways, turbocharged the economies, our economy in terms of mainstreaming the women. But collectively, I think, we need to make sure that when you have these positions, it is not about being at the center. It is about helping those who are there at the lower level, and that is a sole responsibility when you get into these offices.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kagioza. Now let's wind up with the last question. This is about observers, international observers. So there is usually the UN, SADC, all these organizations, they usually send observers during elections. So how significant are they? So there's different views about them. Some people say these usually work in, so they come to developing countries and they kind of come up with all these observations, which may be not usually so positive. But when you look at the other developed countries like the US and other European countries, you don't see the same observations like in underdeveloped countries. What is your take on this?
Well, double standard. because, I mean, you cannot insist. But I think it's also on our part. We want to be transparent because there's a lot of suspicion out there in the world to say, so President so-and-so is overstaying in power. You know, one neighbor has stayed there for over 40 years. And I think there are 3 or 4 of them who have stayed there since independence, you know. So, but they go for elections. Museveni goes for elections, and he's elected. So if the observers come and they see the electoral process and they vindicate that the people still want that president, actually it takes away their pessimism that why should the leader be there? But if the people want that leader, it is one thing. And they don't talk about the leader, an old leader in their own societies, you know? How old is Trump, for example? He's close to 80, but nobody talks about his age. But the American people want him, so they voted him, and we have no issue with that. And I think we are kind of saying they should also let Africa make its own decisions. Let the observers come, let them see the process of elections, let them convince themselves that the process was free and fair, and that gives us a lot of credibility internationally.
The international community.
Yeah.
Dr. Kayoza.
Yeah, I think it's a debate. It's a very serious debate. I think going forward, there are things that the people in the South and the developing countries should be discussing more. A few days ago, I was listening to one of the famous professors, Wei of China, and he was arguing. His argument is that multipolarity is happening in the world, but he would like to see what he called the multipolarity world order. And I think what he's trying to use from that fact is that we will have different ways of organizing our states. And of course, there can't be, as Mwalimu Nyerere said, that democracy is not like Coca-Cola, that you can get from one nation, pose it to the other. And I think it is time that we accept that we'll have our own ways, as long as our pursuit, our constant pursuit, is to have sovereignty, and 2, prosperity. Lastly, that even when we are doing that, as Baloza said, I think if you scrutinize how people deal with their democracies, you won't be, I think, convinced to follow their ways if you keenly do that. And therefore, it is only fair for even other people. But again, because we have accepted, we are a civilized nation. We are building here in Tanzania a civilization state. And in that aspect, we have allowed people from all over the planet to be with us in matters development, in matters democracy. And therefore, we don't have issue with them being here. But of course, what we are requesting, I think, everyone is saying that in Tanzania, what we are requesting, and this in developing countries, is that even when we allow our friends to have their hand in terms of seeing what is happening, it is only fair for them to understand and to accept that there is a Tanzania way of doing things, unless let them accept that has to be our Tanzania way. As the president keeps on saying that we have our values, we have our culture. Even if we say this is how we run things, we have to protect the way we will keep on building a civilization state called Tanzania.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kayoza and Ambassador Dr. Msuya Mangachi. And that marks the end of our program, Tanzania Today. And today we were discussing about the significance of the election process towards national development. I am your host, Faitha Ngaga. Until next time, goodbye.